achieved amazing things. Their storytelling is fantastic. Their sound is exemplary. The diversity of topics is absolutely fascinating. And I'm hoping that we'll get an insight on how it all began and why. But for starters, because, it's late in the day here for me and my English language has gone completely out the window. I'm going to get the ball rolling with each of you. Just a bit of an introduction and a quick pitch to the listener or the viewer about you and what your podcast is about. Ellie, do you want to start the ball rolling for us?
All right, I'll come in hot here. Okay. Hi. Hi, I'm Ellie. I am representing mine and my friend Brit's podcast called Behind ADHD and Me. We are both late diagnosed women with ADHD. I also have the autism, but this is just about ADHD. We created a show through Viva La Dirt League, which is a YouTube channel that we both have acted with for about 8 years. They're Kiwi creators who have been doing gaming videos and all sorts of other comedy stuff. And we were very lucky for them to basically say, do you want to do your own show? And we were like, let's do something that means something to us and hopefully will help others. So we created a web series called ADHD and Me. And then off the back of that, we created this podcast, which is called Behind ADHD and Me. And essentially, the podcast goes through each episode, what it was like to film it, write it, what inspired each episode. And then naturally, we end up talking about our ADHD, how we were diagnosed, etc. So the podcast is sort of an insight to behind the scenes on set, but then also behind the scenes of our brains, I suppose, and why we made the show, how we came about, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, really proud of it. We released this podcast in May of this year under Viva La Dirt League, produced by me though. I'm also a radio person and a podcast host and producer, so I produced it physically. But Viva La Dirt League were really awesome to essentially fund it for us. And what else do you want to know? Is there anything else?
Look, I mean, that's fantastic. It's whatever you're comfortable with sharing.
Okay. So that's that. And we actually found a lot of people resonated with it because ADHD has not been researched fully for like a lot of people in the world for a very long time. So we're kind of opening up these stereotypes and smashing them down and saying that ADHD isn't what you think it is, and tried to create a friendly, approachable environment to tell the story. We've got about 19,000 streams across all the apps so far. And we actually just won the best nonfiction podcast at Sydney Web Fest, which was very cool. But yeah, it's resonated really, thank you. It's resonated really well with our audience and just opened up conversations I think that people wouldn't maybe naturally have. So yeah, very proud of this project, and it's very dear to my heart. Like, it didn't involve a lot of research like a lot of your projects do, because it was just our brains. Really, it was just us opening up and being vulnerable and sharing our journey. So
that's fantastic. Karthik, do you want to jump in and let us know a little bit about yours?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for thanks for this. It's great to be here and great to join so many producers and creators making great podcasts. So my name is Karthik, and I'm a wildlife filmmaker and a podcast producer. So I come from a film background. So I'm based in Dunedin, which is in the South Island of Aotearoa, New Zealand. So the weather is changing. The weather is now gusty. It hailed in the morning. So it's that kind of a place where it's like they say it's like you gotta head out of the car. So that's the feel we get in Dunedin here. But so I'm producing Tune Into Nature, a podcast bringing people natural sounds and stories. So we go out into the wild along with rangers and conservationists, wildlife biologists and experts working with Aotearoa's wildlife, and we go out and record their stories, and we edit it into a narrative style podcast and produce episodes. So each episode follows a species or a person doing their own passion project, being conservation. So it's kind of one of the few shows in New Zealand that goes out to record audio. So majority of our content is recorded outdoors. That comes with its own challenges.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's how we got episodes on. So with this focus, seasons 2 and 3 focus is about underdog wildlife. So wildlife that many people don't know about, and so that kind of a species, that's our focus for these 2 seasons. Yeah, so that's Tune into Nature.
It's fantastic. Sarah, would you like to tell us a little bit about yours?
Sure. And yes, thank you for the opportunity. It's really great to meet all of you. I'm Sarah Barker. I have a film background, but it's a lot going on here, but I don't want to take up too much time. So I'll just say I went to film school, but I came out a sound designer. I taught community college for 20 years. I left that job about 2 years ago to finish my doctorate in media psychology.
Oh, wow.
So this podcast is actually practicum work. It was an assignment for a class that I had, and it's a 6-part documentary series. And what I did is I went around and I interviewed 11 experts who've been working in virtual reality and immersive technology. One of them is my faculty advisor, Dr. Skip Rizzo, and he's been working with PTSD and veterans on the front line using virtual reality and exposure therapy. So each episode is about a different way that doctors and researchers and developers and a lot of people are using VR outside of gaming. Because, I think a lot of times people think of VR and they, oh yeah, I love the game. I do too. But actually, there's thousands of studies to show that VR has a lot of efficacy for chronic pain, PTSD, depression, and a lot of other things. So that's what the podcast is about. And thanks for the thanks for the opportunity. Appreciate it.
It's a little bit of an intro and a pitch, isn't it? Katie, can you tell us about Shadow Clock?
So Shadow Clock is a podcast about life-changing moments, big or small. It's so interesting to hear all of you talking about your backgrounds. I'm also originally a filmmaker. My background was film and video. I was doing narrative and then moved into documentary shorts. And then I did a feature about 10 years ago, a little more now. That one was called Welcome to Unity. And I really love telling people stories. So for me, it's really interesting too. Is it Karthik? Do I say your name correctly?
Yeah.
My 4th episode is actually about a biologist who is kidnapped by FARC. And he's Colombian. He's a Colombian biologist kidnapped by FARC. And after his release, years later, he started working with the same people that took him to help them assimilate back into Colombian society after the peace agreement. So that was like a bigger moment. But I do smaller moments too. I did, one of my best friends is visiting me right now with their girlfriend, and I did their first kiss. That's a good example of like a smaller moment. My first episode was with Bob Scheiblein, who is a very proud bank robber. He likes to be called a bank robber. He is a bank robber. He did a lot of time for bank robbery before he ended up in Alcatraz. And it was Alcatraz, hearing those bar doors slam shut. That moment was what kind of triggered his mind to think, okay, I can't do this anymore. I can, kind of change. So I take the stories and then I cut out the interview as much as possible and create it into more of an audio doc style of storytelling. It's all audio, obviously. And it's been, I released in October a year ago. It won, I always get confused with the categories, right? Like I'm going to say it wrong, but best nonfiction up in Toronto. At Minnesota Wet Fest, it also won best. Blake and I were there together. Mine was best nonfiction, right? Blake, what was your win in? It was a different category, but I'm like, okay, I don't want to mess up the category. And that's how I met Blake, actually, was at Minnesota Wet Fest. So, it's been a really awesome ride. I meet so many interesting people. And right now I'm constantly trying to figure out, how to work that job to make your living while also balance what I love doing. And this is this podcast.
So I think we all get that.
Absolutely.
So.
Absolutely.
Blake, it's over to you and the TMI project. Tell us a little bit about it.
This is such a group of cool kids. It's really impressive to hear what's coming out of everyone's little squares. It's really, really cool. Makes me feel super honored to be here on behalf of TMI Project. For context, this is the coolest wall in my house that I sit in front of for these kinds of things. But the problem is you might see my delicious boyfriend wander in and out of the room as I'm talking. So forgive us for the guest star. He's cool.
It's
yeah,
okay. So I have a sabotage cat that only likes the computer when I'm Zooming.
I really hope that happens for me then. Just personally, that sounds delightful. So yeah, it's the reason I think that it's extra special to be here is because the show that I work on with, so first of all, I'm here on behalf of an organization. We are the producers behind this podcast, and it's an atypical situation because we started as an organization 15 years ago, a nonprofit in Kingston, New York, which is 90 minutes north of New York City. And it wasn't supposed to be a thing. It was just a group of women telling stories in their living room that were true stories that revealed the sort of TMI parts of their stories that they typically leave out because of shame or embarrassment, all of the things that actually wind up binding us all together. And as I was listening to everyone tell their podcast summaries, I was like, oh man, this is truly what binds us all together, is the fact that we have unique perspectives in this group. And I think that that's what's really interesting and intriguing to me about like the way that documentary audio storytelling is going, is because we get to kind of see it in like a first layer way where we're talking to people's like truest, like deepest, most darkest secrets. But what y'all are doing is that, and then there's the layer of it that's just your own personal way of hearing other people's stories, which is, I think, the most beautiful part about all of this. But the TMI Project Story Hour, it's a catalog of 15 years of working with everyday people like you and me who didn't maybe know how to tell their story, but really, really wanted to.
Yeah.
We teach them over the course of a workshop how to do that. And we're specifically looking to identify the TMI parts of people's stories that they typically leave out because of shame or embarrassment. They get on a stage, they tell that story in front of a variety of different audiences, from a living room to the United Nations, where we read, I think, in 2015. And it's this amazing moment that you get to watch because there's exchange between the audience and the storyteller, wherein the storyteller is releasing this like dark, dark secret, and the audience is receiving it. And you can literally see spines get straighter. You can just see a shift happen. And I think right now, the reason I'm so happy to be in this group also is because these are the kinds of stories that we really need to be telling right now, because we're at a very contentious moment as a planet. And that's why I think audio storytelling could save the world. So that's our show. And I will say,
And I think absolutely every single one of us will agree. So let's move to something that is beautiful about what we do and the storytelling is, I know that each and every one of you, very different subjects, very different approaches, but I'd love to know what has been the best moment in telling your stories. Now, it could be someone you've met, it could be a reaction you got, it could be something you said, even validation from your parents. It doesn't matter. Basically, what is one of the best moments that has just stuck with you and just went, yeah, okay, this is why I'm doing it? Katie, get home.
I know exactly what mine is, or one of them. So an episode I released it back in October. Actually, it's the one with NZ Webfest. So I'm so glad that lined up. I forgot that's specifically it. My episode
Excellent segue.
Thank you. It was on purpose. It's called Three Strangers. It's episode 2, and it was about a man named Ted Wallace who was swimming down in St. Croix, and a current took him. And 2 men tried to save him. Sven Hill-Madsen swam out to help him, and he died doing so. And then Bali Shabaka Kaza Amlak was the man that was able to eventually pull him out of the water. And so for me, it was really interesting to hear, painful to hear this. Ted tells me the story, he tells me how he was saved and how affected he was by Sven's sacrifice, right? Yeah. And Bali also being there and able to help. So he had mentioned to me that after it all had happened, Bali is a Black man, and he had said what made him saddest is he felt the story could have helped with some race relations. Ted is a white man. And that he really wasn't mentioned much in the news. No one asked for Bali's side of the story. He was very broken up about Sven's death. It affected him profoundly. He says that anytime he sees a Danish man, he's taken back to that moment, trying to help him. And he reached out and said, like, thanks for sharing the story from what profoundly affected me from a different point of view, and from a point of view where he wanted people to use the story for like a social justice cause. I don't think of it as a social justice story. My point of view is a white point of view from a white woman. He
Yeah.
really put me in my place when he said that, because I hadn't seen that from his point of view.
Mhm.
And so it taught me something too about seeing how all these stories that we tell and talk to other people about, everybody's playing a different role in how those stories affect each of us. And
Yeah.
I had never thought of the race component until Ballet had said that to me. And so I appreciated him sharing that with me, and being, brave enough to share that with me. And I'm really glad he did, So yeah, that was a big moment for me.
Ellie, what about you? What was that one moment?
The one moment, also, Katie, love what you've just said, and I think it's so important. This is why diversity is so important in every story we tell. So thank you for also being open to that feedback as well. It is important to realize that we don't have a lot of the stories told in the history so far have been from one main perspective. So I love that you're reflecting, and they had the bravery to even say that to you. Mine is kind of like similar in the way of ADHD has been told through the lens of mainly the straight white male kind of lens, and that's all that the medicine had kind of been studying as well. So for this podcast, the memorable moments, that's quite hard to say, for me, is getting those personal direct messages from people essentially saying, oh my goodness, I relate so much to your podcast. Thank you for telling these stories. I never thought I didn't think I was ever ADHD because the stories I've seen don't match me, but your experiences matches me. And I've now realized that I might be, and my children might be, and now I'm able to teach them about what it might be through your storytelling with this web series, but then also the podcast with the insight. So I think for me, even just getting that one message, there were lots, but the first one, it was like, oh, okay, me being vulnerable, and Britt and I coming out and being really, really raw with like, not just the quirky stuff of ADHD, but the hard stuff too. And people relating to that and feeling like they don't need to beat themselves up as much as what we've kind of been doing. Because that thing, if you undiagnosed or understand your brain, it affects your mental health, and that's what it costs. You could still be really successful, but it's the mental health that is the cost, and the internal battle. So just hearing that our stories, even if they haven't gone and got a full diagnosis, because again, expensive, you may have to be privileged to even afford stuff like that, or even have access to it. Being able to see that some people are starting to at least just identify and recognize in themselves that that might be why their brain does that. That was just really, really, really rewarding. Yeah.
That heart moment. What about you, Sarah?
Oh, I'm glad I had some time to think about it. Kicking us off, Katie and Ellie. I'd have to say that I met a really cool human, Mistress Mix, and they dance in VR 5 days a week. They have 11 points of tracking, and they design their own avatars. And I don't know how, for the audience, 11 points of tracking, just look it up and then look and see what an avatar looks like when the person that's in it has 11 points of tracking. It'll really blow your mind. But really, I think Mistress Mix just represents a lot of what I heard when I interviewed people, which is that VR can be life-saving for people, quite literally. And Mistress Mix was a really good example of someone who lived in a place where it wasn't safe for them to be a they. And so VR was a place where they could be how they saw themselves. And they could feel safe doing it. And so we worked together afterwards to make a little music video, like a half, live action. I was the live action part, and Mistress Mix was the VR part, and it was just great. We just formed a really cool friendship, and I think they're amazing. Yeah.
Are you still in contact with them today?
Yeah, a little bit. I can't do VR actually, so I don't get to keep in touch as much as I'd like to, because people who are into VR, they're in VR a lot.
Right.
Yeah.
Karthik, what about you?
Yeah, so mine is about I think one special moment, and one of the great moments I had was with wildlife. I think you can never tell if they'll be there. I think you can walk miles into the forest trying to record, and they won't be there because many of these species that we are trying to record are endangered or are in very small numbers due to various reasons. And this was about Westland petrel. So these are a seabird on the west coast of New Zealand. So the west coast is around 700 kilometers, but these birds nest only in an 8 kilometer patch of forest. That's where they nest. They don't nest anywhere else in the world. So they nest there.
Yep.
And they don't nest seabirds. I thought they might be close to the coast, but these birds, like they come in, fly into the forest, and then they just crash land through the trees. So that's how they land. So we went into the forest along with Bruce Stuart Menteith, who's been studying these birds in his property for, I think, for over 30 years. And I think we went along with him. And then he was chatting along the way. Like we went along the stairs. It's a dark. They come down at dusk. So the land of the colony, it's at dusk. So it's dark. It's like a proper rainforest, and it's like it gets a meter of rain, that region. So it's a proper rainforest, and it's not that warm. But I think we are walking up, and where he's taking us through, he's explaining how these birds land. And he says, like, he was telling me, like, before I was asking him how. So we sat on a bench, and then we are waiting for the birds to come. And he was like, okay, you might, if you're they might crash land, you might not see them because you can hear them. You can hear a crash and you can hear a thump because they crash through the trees and hit the branches, and they land plop on the ground. So that's how they land. And they walk to their burrows and to during breeding season. Then they live there.
That's
And it was
incredible.
like, yeah, and he was like, you might not see them. And then, but if you're lucky, you might have one land on your lap because they might come into the bench where you're there, and then it would land right on your lap or on the deck. And then we were waiting, and this is one of the moments I was happy it was rolling, because in video and like in audio, like you never know when to roll. And I was rolling, and I was waiting for the birds to come in, and you saw, okay, they're circling, they circle, and then they come in, they find, okay, they have this mechanism where they can see where their burrow is, so they land very close to their burrow. So exceptional navigating skills these birds have. And they were circling, and then one came, and he says, okay, there's one coming in. And then one came right at us and plopped right next to me with a big thump right on the wooden bench. So we were really lucky to capture that Westland petrel. This is a bird I've never seen, and it lives
Oh,
only in small part of the forest in New Zealand. So that was a really great moment, and sharing Bruce's work with the audience. And his story is not being featured much on audiovisual media. Around sharing that with with an audience was great. It was special, and we have got and audience comments like Ellie mentioned as well. Like when audience say it's great, your work is great, it resonates with them. I think that's one of the best moments as well.
that is incredible. I was like, what are the odds? Blake,
Yeah,
what about you? I mean,
so lucky. Yeah.
what about you? The whole
Well,
TMI project is about those those wonderful moments, but is there anything that's particularly stand out?
yeah, for sure. Karthik, I'm sorry, I just have to backtrack for 2 seconds. It's rare that like the New York comes out in me, and it takes a really special story to get it to come out. But at the last part of that story, I don't know if you saw me, but I went, no fucking way. Like it very, very hard came out of my body. So that was incredible. As has been everybody. Yeah, I mean, we found maybe like 7 years in that every one of the stories that comes out of our workshop space typically would fall into one of 4 different social justice focus areas: mental health awareness, LGBTQIA plus rights, racial justice, and gender equity. And also just like a grandiose intersection most of the time. And because of that, we started building internal programs that were focused on different social justice movements, not because we consider ourselves any kind of grassroots social justice, like well-trained organizers, but because we know how to tell stories. And stories are the fundamental part of any social justice movement across time and space. It's rooted in true storytelling, where people are getting on a stage and saying, actually, no, that experience is not true for me. This experience is true for me. So Katie, when you were talking earlier, I was agreeing with Ellie, and then like I assaulted my screen with hearts, but I was agreeing in the fact that you sharing, being vulnerable and saying, I did not see that. I was blinded by my own whiteness. That was just encouraging. So this is all to say that one of our programs, we recently partnered with Period Power, which is a national organization here in the United States that is trying to eradicate period poverty. The episode that we submitted to this very WebFest is called Tina the Tampon Lady, and it is about the woman who runs the club at the local high school in our town in Kingston, New York. It's a city of 28,000 people. It is split down the center politically. So it is like a microcosm of America right now as it stands, where there's just two very clear political identities. Of course, underneath all of that, there's like all of these other ones. But when you have a mixed bag of 28,000 people, you're going to have a lot of different viewpoints on what period education looks like. It's not something that we talk about. Menstruation is something that is the last on a lot of people's lists, like after sexual intercourse. And so even when we started this work with them, I was unbelievably ignorant of so many parts and components to what it actually means to be somebody who menstruates, which is crazy to think about because we're all born somehow. And so no matter what your gender identity is, you should absolutely know at the very least the basics of how a biological female body works. So this is all to say that I learned a lot, and I was super glad. We've been working with them to produce this video podcast series that's going to be coming out starting in May, called Period Power. And when Katie and I were at Minnesota WebFest, I had two shows there, and one of them was this one, which is Tina the Tampon Lady. And I was at the audio screening, and there were like 4 people in the audience, and it was a theater of like 500 people. So it was like, yikes. So I was kind of feeling a little bit down. And then our episode starts, and one of the storytellers shares statistics about some of the chemicals that exist inside of menstrual products that people who menstruate are putting into their bodies on a monthly basis, and the things that it can do to the human body. There was an older gentleman sitting in front of me, and out loud, like he was in a horror movie, he turns to his group, and it was 3 women and him, and just like out loud, he goes, "Is that true?" And all the women, their heads all turned like in unison. It was like choreography. And they turned and they went, "Of course it's true." And like it all of the hardship that go into putting together a podcast series where we're asking people to tell us their darkest secrets, to have that happen was like, this is why we do these things, because that is human connection. That man just admitted out loud to everyone, "I'm ignorant of something and I am admitting it." And that was really cool.
That is fantastic. So with all of these incredible sort of moments and the research that goes into what you do and the time and the effort, do you guys have any questions for each other? Go for it, Blake.
Sorry, I have 100 questions.
You were the one that I first saw that just went nodded. Just went yes.
Yeah. I'm really curious because
like, unmute people. Let's have a conversation.
Thank you. No, that's really exciting. The thing that I've been thinking about recently, and I've been wanting to talk to the right people about this, and this is the room full of the right people, is like, I feel that we're getting a lot of messaging that podcasting is somehow dead because capitalism has really taken over in a lot of instances, and it's become a marketable thing. And it used to be this very cool, edgy, independent thing where we were like really getting original voices into the room and really getting to hear stories from such a perspective that was just really exciting. And I feel like the messaging has kind of like scraped over the fact that there are still very, very unique original voices coming out in this particular stratosphere. And so what I'm curious to hear from a room of people, all of whom your podcasts, Ellie, when you won the Sydney Web Fest, I went and just like dove into your show. And it's like one more thing I don't know. Anyway, the question is, what compels the four of you to tell the stories in the way that you tell them? Like, what is it inside you that's like that feels confident enough to be like, no, this is how I'm going to tell this story. I'm going to tell it this way, and because it works for me.
I think for me and Britt, because this topic is so personal to us that we've spent obviously our whole lives up until I was 28 when I got diagnosed with ADHD, kind of really battling with our mental health, actually, if I'm honest. That was what was the issue, and anxiety meds didn't work and all this stuff didn't work. So when I finally got the answer of the ADHD and also autism for me, there was a massive click in my brain, and I've never felt more motivated and like fiery to now make sure that other people who are younger or older than me do not face the journey I faced. Mine comes from a really personal area, I think, of like, I don't want people to suffer like I did. And I have learned so much, and it's ironically become one of my special interests. And so I've ended up educating myself heaps on not just my life experience, but I'm trying to get a broad view of everyone's. But of course, again, we say in our podcast multiple times, this is just our perspective. Not everyone's going to have the same experience as us. But I think, yeah, for me, it comes from just a real want to help people feel less alone and stop that self-hate and inward monologue of I'm useless. Why can't I do that? Why can't I do this? Why can I not be on time, et cetera, et cetera. So I think mine comes from a real personal drive to just help others and share my experience, because my whole life up until 28, I never would have thought I had ADHD, is what the combo is called. I never would have thought I had that, because all the stereotypes and vague research I'd seen did not relate to me at all. The stereotypes that we know do not match me at all. So I have this real want now to try and smash those away and go, there's way more perspectives of this. And also it's not affordable for everyone to get a diagnosis. So I want to educate people from my perspective, which may allow them to self-identify that they have this thing, even if they can't afford an official diagnosis. Because for me, the diagnosis was so much more to me than the medication I was given for my ADHD. It helps me for sure, but it's the diagnosis that changed my life. So if I can share the story and people can identify that they might be ADHD, ADHD, autistic, then that makes me happy knowing that I'm helping others, I guess. So mine's very personal. It's kind of like I didn't even think about it. It's just like, oh my gosh, I have to tell everyone this. You know, you're all listening now. But yeah,
I'll just speak for myself. I think, I'm a documentarian, so I think that this podcast just uses the same voice that I do as a documentarian. And we'll see how your audience feels about this, but yeah, I don't know. When it comes to creativity, I genuinely don't care what other people think. I care what I think, I really don't know what else to say about that. Thanks.
No, I don't think that's a bad thing at all. I mean, this is how we get our stories. This is how we get, the passion project, because, we generally have to work another job in order to, allow us to delve into these worlds and these stories. Katie, what about you?
You said Katie, right? Yes. Okay. For me, it's funny. A big piece of doing audio podcast is I'm not afraid of public speaking. I do fine in crowds, but I don't really love being on camera. I don't like being in front of the camera. And as much as you're posting, I don't really like the spotlight. And I think that it surprises people because I seem very extroverted. I seem very outgoing. I get most of my energy I like to be alone. I'm very extroverted, but I do get my energy from being alone and editing and writing and taking in the world that way. I like to travel alone until I met my husband. And once I met him, then I had a traveling partner, which is great. Hi, Alejandro. But So that was a big piece of it, is like wanting to take my voice out as much as possible. And then because of the narrative filmmaking background, I felt comfortable weaving that VO throughout that tells the story. And then the other part is, I feel like in a world where no one seems to be listening to each other, it's just talk and talk and talk, but no actual listening. That's how I feel like we can learn the most, is if you actually really listen to what someone's saying and what that experience meant to them and means to them. You hear what they have experienced and learned, and then you learn a little bit more about yourself. And then hopefully you learn how to move a step forward, maybe be a little bit better the next day, maybe make a difference, maybe rethink your thoughts, maybe not rethink anything. Maybe it literally was just something that you heard and you took with you that moment and you thought, I've never thought of that perspective, and you move on. But for me, I think I learned the most by hearing about other people's experiences. And I guess maybe, Blake, not until you asked this question, but maybe that's why I like doing it, is because I like conversations that make people think and get outside of their comfort zone and experience life in someone else's shoes, even if it's for a 15, 40-minute podcast episode.
Yep.
Yeah.
Kathy?
Yeah, again, coming from a film background, I think they say sound is 51% the film. So turn sound off and you don't get any effect when you're watching a movie. So I come from that background. So recording sounds I was fascinated by the world of recording sounds and what you can hear, the natural world. And I think COVID-19 happened and the cities fell silent and we started recording. Okay, there was bird song and that's how we started. So I thought, okay, let's share these sounds with people. And then I realized, okay, I was filming, I was working with conservation groups for my films and also volunteering and stuff. So then I thought, okay, these stories are not being told. So why not tell these stories? And when you think about wildlife, it's many of the stories center wildlife and there will be a narrator, but they center the wildlife. But I wanted to center the people working with wildlife and then tell the stories of wildlife. So that's why that's my angle sort of. So that I feel that will help people to connect with the stories as well, with respect to just talk about a bird or species. Yeah, so the people element was key to me.
That's a great question, Blake. There's actually 3 or 4 down my list, and we haven't even we haven't even touched them. But we are sort of like almost running out of time. But I thought maybe it's not really a panel thing, but would you guys like to share a bit of pod love? Is there a podcast that you listen to that you would love other people to know about, something that you really enjoy or that really resonates with you? Doesn't have to be nonfiction. It can be fiction. It can be actual play. It can be TTRPG. Or is there? Yeah. Oh, go, Katie, go.
So I met another podcaster, Fede Vargas, and Blake, you know Fede, right? My Authentic Life. I just started listening to their podcast, his podcast. It's lovely because he focuses on life-changing moments too, but he's doing it in a very different way that I do it. So it was really cool I got to meet him up in Toronto. So you should check out his show. It's awesome. And he's so who he is on the show in person. And, I feel like he often, thanks, Blake, just plugged it. Thank you so much for doing that. But what's so great about his show is that he's listening to his guests and you walk away learning something, right? You walk away having a little taste of life that you didn't see before. So that would be mine.
That would be yours. Anybody else want to share? I mean, if you don't have to, if you can't think of anything, because I have put you on the spot, you don't have to.
Yeah, I can be very quick. It's a show called Vanishing Postcards that my friend Evan produces. And he's gone across the country, the United States, and he's gone to places that are watching a really slow demise happen. And he's going to different individual, specifically food joints, and talking to the owners about what it means for their community, for this hub where food is experienced together is slowly dying. It's gorgeous. And he's just like one of the best storytellers I've ever heard in my whole life, where it's just that thing of like, he just takes your brain and like puts it on a different planet. It's really beautiful and I would highly recommend it.
So that was the Vanishing Postcards.
That's how I feel about Blake's show. I'm not just saying that with help. Oh my God, I'm blanking on your name. Plug yourself.
TMI project.
No, your other podcast.
I produced another show called All American Ruins. That's what she's
Thank
talking
you.
about.
And that's how my brain feels when I listen to that one. And I'm not just saying that to be nice. I
No,
approached Blake. Yeah, I got to say that.
Oh my God,
Okay,
let's
sorry.
just talk about me for the rest of the time. No, no, thank you. That's very sweet. I put Vanishing. Okay.
We are out of time, but I would love to thank you all so much. You've got exceptional stories that you tell in such a wonderful, amazing, and incredible way. And the breadth of the topics is just phenomenal. I'm a nerd way back. I grew up on radio. So for me, podcast is just a natural progression and I take it everywhere with me. I have listened to your podcast. I have enjoyed every single one of them. It's been such a pleasure meeting you all. And thank you so much for taking the time to join us for the New Zealand Web Fest.
Thank you.